Hi everyone, my name is Madeline Ware, and today I'm going to be presenting on nuclear power, the science, efficacy, and efficiency of a rising sustainable energy source. There are two types of nuclear reactions, fusion and fission. Fission is currently used to generate electricity, while fusion research is not yet advanced enough to produce technology that can be operated commercially. In fusion, two nuclei join to form a larger nucleus, while in fission, a larger nucleus is split to form two daughter nuclei. Since its discovery in 1938, nuclear power has remained a controversial topic. Public perception of nuclear energy has been tainted by the devastating history surrounding the use of atomic weapons and the meltdown of nuclear plants. In 2018, the United States Energy Information Administration stated that 55% of emission-free electricity came from nuclear fission in the United States. 19.4% of the total electricity output in the United States was also from nuclear fission. In a nuclear fission reaction, a neutron hits a uranium-235 nucleus and splits it, creating two smaller daughter nuclei. In this case, krypton-94 and barium-139. When uranium-235 splits, it releases energy as well as neutrons that can go on to hit more uranium-235. And this is called a nuclear chain reaction, and the nuclear chain reaction is propagated by the continual release of neutrons during fission. While energy is released in fission, energy must also be used to overcome the forces that hold an atomic nucleus together, and this energy is called binding energy. So if an atom has a very high mass number, it's going to have a low binding energy, meaning that it isn't going to require very much energy input to undergo fission. But if an atom has a low mass number, it's going to have a high binding energy, meaning that it's going to require a lot of energy to undergo fission. In nuclear power plants, reactors are used to harness the energy that's given off by fission reactions. So the most popular reactor is a thermal reactor, and the fuel for that reactor is uranium-235. And uranium-235 is a great fuel because it has a low binding energy. So this means that it's going to require less energy input to actually split the nucleus than a compound with a higher binding energy would. So when the nucleus is split and it releases neutrons, those neutrons are moving at a very high speed. And so in order to maintain a stable nuclear chain reaction, a neutron moderator has to be used. And in the case of the thermal reactor, that neutron moderator is water. And water is used because since it's a small compound, it has a fairly high binding energy, so that when neutrons collide with it, they slow to a speed where they can actually react with uranium-235 and maintain the nuclear chain reaction. In this figure, we can see that a slow neutron comes in, hits uranium-235, and it splits, and fast neutrons in light green are given off. So then the fast neutrons interact with the neutron moderator, or water, and slow neutrons are created. And these slow neutrons are then able to come into contact with uranium-235 and allow the nuclear chain reaction to continue. While there are a number of pros to using fission as an energy source, there are also some objections that are commonly made about claims that energy corporations make regarding their carbon emissions as well as other issues. So first claim is that carbon emissions from nuclear power are lower than emissions from fossil fuels. An objection to this is that in reporting CO2 emissions, energy companies often leave out emissions from many of the steps required to process reactor fuel. So there's like 14 different steps that are required to process reactor fuel, and some of those steps actually do emit CO2. And so even though the actual fission reaction itself does not emit CO2. So once all those steps are accounted for, the CO2 emitted from fission is actually equivalent to the CO2 emitted from natural gas processing. A second claim is that renewables like solar and wind innately have intermittency issues that limit their ability to keep up with energy needs. And so this means that solar and wind have intermittency issues because their ability to generate energy relies on the weather. So in an objection to this, a lot of people would say that yes, solar and wind do have intermittency issues, but nuclear power plants also don't run 100% of the time. The World Nuclear Association states that reactors were only actually active 70% of the time due to extensive maintenance, safety checks, part replacements, and refueling. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission stated that in 2011 that 28% of nuclear plants had covered up defective plant parts in order to avoid expensive replacements. So while there are pros to fission, there also seem to be some very obvious cons, and it's maybe not the perfect renewable or sustainable energy source that people initially make it out to be. A world powered by sustainable energy through fusion is the ideal solution to humanity's impending energy crisis. There are several good things about fusion, namely, it generates a lot of energy while creating very little waste. Secondly, there is an abundance of the fuel necessary for the fusion reaction. So, in fusion reactions, hydrogen isotopes are used, so deuterium and tritium. And that one of the main reasons that the fusion reaction is so sustainable is because deuterium and tritium are so readily available. So, in The Science of Fusion, Stephen Baird states that the hydrogen isotopes in just 1 gallon of seawater would generate the energy equivalent of 300 gallons of oil. In a fusion reaction, deuterium and tritium are fused to form a helium atom. Deuterium and tritium are both isotopes of hydrogen. When they fuse to form helium, neutrons are given off as well as a bit of mass that can be converted to an energy equivalent. Deuterium and tritium have mass numbers that when combined should equal 5, but they make an atom whose mass number is 4. And that's where that little bit of mass that's released is coming from. In order to convert that mass to an energy equivalent, Einstein's mass energy equivalence formula is used. E equals mc squared, where E is energy, m is mass, and c is the speed of light. In order to harness the energy fusion creates, scientists need to replicate the extreme conditions found in the interior of the Sun and other stars. The particles must be heated to temperatures over 1.5 times 10 to the 7 Kelvin, removing electrons from their nuclei and creating a plasma that contains ions and electrons. The electrostatic repulsions created from the positively charged hydrogen ions are typically overcome by the Sun's large inward gravitational pull. Magnetic confinement is one of the methods that was created in an attempt to mimic this pull and involves using a magnetic field to manipulate the charged plasma. Another method, inertial confinement, uses strong lasers and particle beams that both heat and compress the nuclei. The obstacles facing scientists attempting to facilitate fusion and harness its power are large and have not yet been overcome. However, ongoing fusion research and development has inadvertently benefited other important areas. The medical field has been impacted by the development of magnetic resonant imaging systems, or MRI, and the electronics industry has seen a new line of high-quality plasma displays. The breadth of impact experienced from fusion research will only continue to expand as more efforts are made. Even though statistics suggest that fission is not truly a clean source of sustainable energy, nuclear energy is still a more positive option than fossil fuels given that its materials are longer lasting. If the public could overcome its fear of nuclear fallout and reactors were upgraded, fission would provide a temporary fix to the looming energy crisis. While the idealized dream of sustainable energy through fusion has not yet been accomplished, research and development has contributed to advancement in a variety of fields. Nuclear power is an integral part of humanity's collective movements toward more ethical and sustainable energy. Here are my references. Thank you for listening, and leave any questions in the discussion.